We're live on Riverside. Let's see if the internet gods are going to be happy with
I
us
I
here.
still enjoy the fact that this is the lead into every single one of our shows. So if you go back and watch, it's like 2 minutes of us saying like, "Are we starting?"
Are we starting yet? Well, and I mean, we ended up going on Restream. We did Restream for which is another piece of software.
It's like a slow burn into the episode, right? It's just nothing catchy, nothing interesting. We don't really have a good hook at the beginning. It's just
No, but
are
that's why you edit things in
are
post.
are we
You can go
live?
back. Yep, you just go back and edit
Well, so
everything
Eric,
in
are we
post.
live? Are we live?
We are probably live on YouTube, but we are currently not yet live on this lovely thing called LinkedIn. We'll give it another second here. Sometimes it does eventually figure out that it needs to do things. Yeah, it looks like we're good on YouTube here. So
That's something, right?
that's something. That's better than nothing.
All
Well,
right,
we might as well.
let's start. This might be our last time on Riverside,
This might be our last time in Riverside. Yeah,
but we'll
I
get
think
some
I.
we'll get some great content today. We have a great guest. That's why I wore my Emerson college shirt. I went to grad school here. So did this our guest. In fact, a lot of people, if you go look for jobs in multifamily, I'm guessing it's marketers, but you see a lot of folks that's like somebody from your school works here. You do see a lot of that in the prop tech space. I just wanted to call that out, and I will be tagging them. So there you go.
Well, welcome to Multifamily Weekend Update. It is Friday, March 14th.
Yes, 3.14 Pi Day. Happy Pi Day.
3.14. I am definitely going to eat some pie tonight somehow. It may be from a cafeteria, but
It might it might be. But yeah, let's. Why don't we bring on our guests? We have a lot to talk about. It's been a busy week. There's been a lot of events. A lot of events. There's been maybe too many events.
yeah,
But
yeah,
we'll
I think yeah, yes, yes. There's a lot to chat about today, so we'll go ahead and bring on our wonderful guest here,
Hey,
Sarah Graham. Welcome.
welcome.
thank you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday, happy Pie Day.
Yes, you too.
So we've seen a lot of events this week.
Hmm.
You're involved in the event space. I mean, you've been involved in the event space for a long time. But why don't you just like introduce yourself for those that don't know you, and then we'll kind of start talking about events.
Sure, love to do that. Nice shirt too, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm Sarah Graham. I'm founder and CEO of Six Dots, which is a multifamily growth consultancy, and I work with multifamily operators and prop tech teams to help them grow sustainably.
Nice. Awesome. Well, it's great having you. I mean, I've met you years ago. I don't know which management company it was. It may have been Dolben, but it might have been the one before. But I know you've been around the space a lot. You've seen the industry change with events. We're going to talk about events. Eric and I were at one this week, but he had to leave early. Eric, do you want to talk a little bit about why you had to leave a little earlier?
Yeah, well, as life has it, sometimes when you have kids, they decide to get sick when you're traveling. Uh, and as I'll have it, this is the second time my son has unfortunately gotten sick. So I chose to take an earlier flight back home to be with family and help take care of him. So I am calling in live today from a hospital, from a children's hospital in Atlanta. I'm fortunate to have my wife and my mother here, so they're up with my son. But sometimes crazy things
They
happen when you're
do.
away. Yeah.
And sometimes during those events, I mean, Sarah, I know I have at least one story. Did you go to any event at some point in your career and there was some kind of emergency where you had to make like change your travel plans?
100% yes. Um,
I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
I'd be surprised, right? If you go to enough conferences, I think everyone has to hit the eject button at some point. Trying to remember when this was. A couple years ago, I was at OpTech in Las Vegas. And it was actually the night before the conference started, but because I'm based in Boston, I had flown out the night prior. I had an early meeting the next
Yeah.
morning. And so I was at dinner with friends. And as it happened, that particular year, OpTech happened to be scheduled over Halloween. And I have a teenage daughter, and I got a call that she had eaten candy that maybe had something in it illegal. And
Everyone's
so,
worst fear. Everyone's worst
you
fear at
know, I was
Halloween.
terrified. And I talked to her on the phone, and she sounded completely out of sorts. And the police got, involved. It was terrifying. And
Yeah.
so, needless to say, I ran back to the hotel, threw everything back into my suitcase, and took a red eye home. So I never even got to OpTech that year. And I was supposed
Yeah.
to be on a panel. And so it just was a colossal mess, but family first always.
Yeah.
Life happens whether we are home or whether we are somewhere else, but family first always. So I
Yeah.
completely
Yeah.
appreciate needing to hit eject early.
Yeah.
And it's tough, right? Especially if you don't even get to really show up. The
Correct.
fear of missing out is a big deal, I think, with these conferences. Whether you plan to be there, plan to stay for the whole thing, or just couldn't go,
Yeah.
Yep.
for whatever reason.
That's a
Yep.
nice segue. I'm going to save my story. It's not that great. I mean, it's good, but it was at Optech. It was at like the Hilton Anatole, which is like doesn't have great cell phone reception, or it didn't at the time. And so like I had some issues just finding out what was going on, but I ended up leaving early. But I like that you talked about FOMO, Eric, a little bit, because FOMO like can happen when you leave early, but it can happen when you don't go, or when there's just too many events that you can't make them all, and so you divide and conquer with your team, or you just decide to put your all eggs in one basket on this one. So the two biggest ones were this week, right? I think that people were talking about RentCon and Multifamily Social Media Summit.
Yeah.
And Eric, you were at most of RentCon, so I'll let you talk. I feel like I'm in the. Am I actually in the middle of you two, like is on the
Tech
screen?
Technically, I'm seeing you in the middle. Yes.
Okay, we have social media on this side and RentCon on this side, and I'll be the
I mean,
you know
I could move. I could
No,
move
no,
you
I
guys.
like this. I like this setup. So, Sarah, I know you didn't go this year, but you're on the council, the board, the advisory board for Multifamily Social Media Summit, and you've been in the past. Could you talk a little bit about sort of what that is, if folks haven't gone or don't know much about it?
For sure, yes. Multifamily Social Media Summit is a conference that is near and dear to my heart. I have been part of the advisory board for close to a decade, I think, at this point, which means I get the pleasure of helping to plan content for that conference. But number one, if you have not been or have not heard of it, it's in Napa, which is a lovely, lovely venue for a conference, or just generally, but for a conference especially, because it's so unique. And the team that puts that conference together, Adam, Andrew, and Luba, do an incredible job really curating the event to be very intimate. It's a few hundred people. There is a trade show component, but that also is very curated, and it feels like you actually have time to get across the entire floor and really have meaningful conversations. But as part of the advisory board, we actually get to help vet not just topics, but speakers, and work with speakers who are outside of the industry to help make sure that they really understand a lot of the pain points that multifamily marketers are working to address. So it is very, very targeted. And again, it's small. So the networking is really meaningful, and you get the chance to do some deep dives and content that you don't always get at the bigger shows.
Yeah. And Eric, why don't you give a little summary? I know this was your first RentCon,
Yeah.
but you've done some research on it. You talked to a lot of people. Like, what would you say,
So,
that's about?
well, RecCon was hosted this year in Las Vegas. It was the first year in Las Vegas. It's a couple of years old at this point. I believe there's been at least five. This is maybe the sixth conference, but essentially it's a real estate innovation conference. It was held March 10th through the 12th, so Monday through Wednesday this year. And really as a culmination of real estate investors, REITs, startups, venture capital, lending. I saw a couple brokers there who were part of it as well. And then, of course, multifamily was, I think, a huge contingent this year. And really, what we talk about is just the various technology. And this year, AI was, I think AI was used in almost every other session title. So as you can imagine, it was a big topic to talk about in real estate. And just to kind of kick things off, I liked how things were broken apart based on whether it was in multifamily, ESG, for brokers, so you could kind of tell what the main topic was about, even if the title or headline of the breakout session was a little generic or not as specific, which there definitely were a lot of headlines where you could have switched the content and it could have been the same thing. So I found that was the case for a couple of the breakout sessions, but really the keynotes, I think were incredible. Brought in a lot of industry titans from everywhere, everywhere from large brokerages to places like JLL. A lot of big developers were there in force, and just really an incredible culmination of like technology and real estate as a whole. Yeah.
I got to go to RecCon last year when it was in New York, which was an easy trip for me from Boston. And I was really impressed. There was a lot of content there, and I appreciated that there was a multifamily focus, but there were other verticals there too. It expanded sort of what I think of as a quote unquote typical conference, because there were other people there and there were more VCs there, and it was a little bit different than some of the other conferences that I've been to in the past.
Yeah, a nice way to like for folks to learn and listen to each other. I went to a couple panels where people were actually in real time on the stage from different industries, kind of learning from each other in that moment. Whereas sometimes you get somebody like you get a whole bunch of people in one industry, they all might be similar minded, or they might have like they all kind of understand the world in which they are. So it's like they're all talking about a topic that they care about, but they aren't learning in real time in the same way. So I thought that, to your point, it was kind of cool just to see that like commercial folks might be learning from something that they didn't really think about that happens in like multifamily. Yeah.
And
Well, yeah, there's a ton of events. I did pull up because we were talking about there was some tears in Vegas, Eric, right? A little for
yeah,
you, yeah, a little.
yeah, mostly
So,
mostly mine after
yeah,
after the networking
yeah.
died down and the gambling started. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in general, I mean, I would go towards Napa and mountains. And Napa does win out. They have like 400 wineries I looked out, whereas Vegas only has 150 casinos. So there's more wineries in Napa than casinos in Las Vegas. So
Wow.
I thought that was a really important fact to share. I don't work for the Napa tourism guide either. I don't. I don't. But I'll take a sponsorship if they're offering. So there's niche events coming up. I would say that like Retcon, some people thought that that was smaller because they're used to going to like Apartmentalize and OpTech, and so they enjoyed the smallness of that. Social Media Summit is obviously smaller, but we're seeing like companies and management companies, prop tech companies, like curating their own events, their own communities, right? We talked about Zuma doing their tour. They did bring the bus to Napa. I guess it looks like they brought the bus to Napa. There's some other ones. Venn just did one, right, Sarah, that you were looking at, and right, they did a what was
Yeah,
it
Ben had
called?
an inner circle
That's right.
event at their headquarters in New York City that had both operators and prop tech partners there, which, again, like you said, very curated. And I think the whole curating with intention is really a cool thing, and it's getting people together in smaller rooms, which I think people are hungry for right now. There's
Yeah.
so much noise, and I think being able to get together in a smaller group can sometimes cut through that and allow for just a deeper level of conversation.
Yeah. And so you have something coming up, right? Like one of those rooms next
I
week?
do.
Yeah.
Yes, next week. I'm partnering up with Opinion, and we are hosting an event in Boston's Seaport, talking about resident engagement and resident retention, which is always a timely topic. I don't care how long you've been in this business, there's no way that you can avoid, talking about why retention matters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exciting. And a good location, like one of the things that, as this like Midwest boy that went to the East Coast for a long time, like the East Coast is kind of like they're the OG of apartments. Like they're like multifamily has grown, but like apartments have been around in these older cities, like like London, like New York, like Boston, like for a long time, and so it's a kind of a different space and kind of an important. They're an important region in our community because they work slightly differently than the apartments in Texas or apartments in Ohio. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
and
the garden style, the more garden style apartments, right? I mean, ultimately in Texas, there's more space to build, so a lot more apartments were spread out, versus in New York, you kind of only build up. So how do you, yeah.
like what how have you seen that change over the years and how do you kind of like with the expansion of like more modern apartment buildings that are coming into these cities, you still have all these other owner operators, management companies that are dealing with these older assets. Like how do you notice the shift, or how do you notice that community in those areas?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll talk about Boston specifically just
Yeah.
for a minute. The place where we are hosting this event next week is in the Seaport. And the Seaport, for those that don't know Boston all that well, was a parking lot. Infill parking lot for 20 plus years. And for me
Oh,
personally, it's a very full circle moment because when I first fell into this business, um, 25 years ago, I actually worked for a development advisory services company. And one of the very first projects I worked on was Fan Pier, which is now
Wow.
part of Boston's Seaport. And so way back then, literally the only thing that was there was what was then the new courthouse, and some very OG restaurants and businesses. And so I used to walk around knocking on doors saying, "Hi, I work for this company and we're going to build this amazing mixed use development here, and will you come support it?" And it's wild because the Seaport now is one of the
That's the
biggest,
place.
most
Yeah.
booming neighborhoods in the city, but it's all new construction for the most part. And so I think that's an interesting way to think about development in general, and how do you sort of weave the old and new together where that makes sense to do that. Or if you've got, what is essentially a blank slate, how do you build community in a way that actually adds value to everything around it and draws people in? I think as multifamily operators and as marketers, I'm a marketer by trade, that's a really interesting thing to wrap our brains around. That's right. Woo
raise the roof. That's right.
right?
All the heavy
So,
lifting. We do all the heavy lifting. Yes.
we are the unsung heroes sometimes, it feels like. But I think it's a really interesting question to say, how do you think about supply and demand and developing old and new? And, Boston is one of those cities where you look around, not the Seaport specifically, because, again, that's mostly new construction there, but I think one of the things that makes Boston and a lot of other cities like Boston, where you've got a population that's been there for centuries, is the mix of old and new. It feels almost European in some cases, where you've got brand new construction next to something that's been there since the 16 or 1700s. So I'm all for it. I think there's the old and new is really what makes the fabric of a city come to life.
I've got a question, and this pertains around, hosting private events, small, more intimate events. I love and appreciate those events very much so. Easier to manage, of
Mm.
course. You can, curate the content a little bit better, get in some really great folks in one room. Why is it that for some reason multifamily doesn't like to spill their secrets on what is working versus not working? And I look at the world of, since I happen to be in a hospital, I look at the world of like medical. The medical world is absolutely open. Doctors share what works. to help other doctors and other practices grow. We don't do that in multifamily. We are still, I think, very competitive, and we hold a lot of things close to the chest when it comes to going to major events like a retcon, right, or an NAA, and exposing, hey, this is what works for us this past year in 2024. We used this AI tool in this way, and we saw this increase, and here's how we did. I mean, why do you think? Why do you think we're just not able to share some of those secrets? And obviously there's, some intellectual property, things like that. I'm not talking about sharing those types of secrets, but just kind of like the tactics, if you will, that ultimately led to the strategic wins.
So I have to play devil's advocate. That's not largely been my experience. And maybe that's because of the intention to bring people together in those smaller rooms where those conversations happen. I have been really lucky during my career to have been part of brain trusts or whatever you might want to call them, where those conversations are happening. And I think the reason we feel okay doing that is because, yes, there is some IP, no question. Every company has it. And if you steer clear of that, you can get down to sort of the brass tacks of it and say, okay, here's the problem that I am working to solve, and what are you doing? And someone can give you that answer. But the way that you then take that information and run with it in your own company, in your own team, in your own business is not a mirror image. Every company has different ways of doing things. You've got different tech stacks, you've got different resources. And so just because company A does something in a certain way, even if you adopt some of that, company B is not going to be doing it the same way.
Now,
And so
the
I think some of that
execution
is
is likely to be completely different. Yeah.
exactly. And so I think because of that, a lot of marketers, at least I'll speak from the seat that I sat in for 20 plus years prior to going out on my own. I think because of that, a lot of marketers feel okay sharing pieces of things, not necessarily the whole playbook. Again, it's not always relevant to do so, but I think there are pieces of things that in trusted circles people feel okay talking about. And I think that's why these smaller events um, are so appealing to people because that's where the real conversations are
Yeah.
happening and people feel safe talking about the things that are working and the things that are not working because there is that community where people feel like they can let their guard down a little bit and really say, hey, we are struggling with this thing. And someone else says, hey, we just tackled that ourselves. And here are a couple of things that we tried that worked. So I think that's one of the things that makes our industry so special.
Yeah. This is great. Yeah. I mean, I look at AI specifically, as this brand new shiny object that is not going away. And everyone's talking about, oh, yeah, we used AI to execute this, like a lot of general topics at these larger conferences. When you go to the breakout sessions, I still feel like that's not happening. The talk is happening in the hallways at these conferences. It's happening, at the after hours events. It's happening at, the smaller events curated by folks like you, right?
Well, I'll play the theater advocate here for a second, or devil's advocate, or I don't know. But I think what it is that when you put the element of presentation in there, you don't want to stick your neck out. It's like politics. You don't want to stick your neck out one way or the other because it can get recorded, it can get transcribed, you don't know who all is in that room watching you or recording you or whatever. So I think there's an element of let me stay somewhere in the middle as best I can. Whereas if you are just sitting with some friends over breakfast and talking about what's going on, that's a different kind of thing than if you're sitting in front of God knows who's in that room and what are they going to take with that information. So I think some of it, to the point, not to dissuade people from doing panels in big conferences, but you're only going to get so far to the left or to the right on any one issue because of that.
Yeah, it makes sense. I just think there's, potential space for a category leader to step in and potentially, put their foot on the
Yeah.
ground and stamp it and say, like, look. we know we're the best at this. We've been doing it now for X amount of years, and we're going to go ahead and show you guys, this is what we've been doing, knowing full well that they're still iterating in the background and making tweaks and already beyond what they are going to be showing you.
Yeah.
But it just, it makes me wonder, is there a company or person or organization that will start doing that on a massively public level? Yeah.
Well, we went, like, it was so good to talk to Sarah, so we went super long. um, so apologies to the other guests that we didn't talk for as long with. I don't know. It's a natural thing. We kind of rolled with it. It just goes with the convo. But before we do go, we'll drop a link to the opinion events that's going to be in the Seaport with you and a few other guests. Next week, we'll drop that in our feeds and such, so people can RSVP. And before we do say goodbye, what is your favorite kind of pie, Sarah? What
Oh, you're
kind of
asking me
pie?
about my favorite kind of pie. I
I
mean,
am. If you
um,
feel like you can share it, if you don't want to like do too much and keep it close to the please, it's okay.
I mean, my favorite kind of pie is wine.
I love the
Feeling my
honesty.
inner Napa, even though I was not there this week. I have friends that are there right now. There's fruit in pie.
There
There's
is
fruit in
fruit.
wine.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That's. I will accept that answer. That's great. That's
Cherry,
great.
well, I'll assume cherry pie. Cherry pie is close to me like a grape. It's
sure,
similar.
yeah,
There's
Yeah,
dessert
something like
wines that are
that.
cherry.
there is.
There's
There
cherry
is.
and berry kind of thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Some yes. So skip the pie. Just give Sarah some wine. Noted. Noted. All right, Sarah. Have a great week, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It was great to talk with you
Yeah.
both.
You too.
Bye
Bye.
bye. All right, let's get on to it. We got a couple of minutes here to kick off
Yeah.
the rest of
I
the news and stories.
I did drop the YouTube link in our next to our event because it's not going
Great.
on live at the moment. But yeah, just besides events, there were events, in Charlotte, Atlanta Apartment Association, Washington State had their EdCon, Maryland Housing had something, and there's probably more events coming up. I did want to call out. Um, I don't know who went, and I don't know what the experience was, but I'm curious to find out more about the Prop Tech House at South by Southwest. Did you read much about this, Eric?
I read a little bit about it. My wife actually happened to go for a different reason,
But not to the Prop
but
Tech House, right?
but not to the prop tech house. Yeah. So I think that's it's a fairly new thing to have housing and multifamily and prop tech at South by Southwest. But
Yeah. Could
I
be
think affordable housing is not new to South by Southwest,
right,
though.
right. It could become a thing. I could see that. Um, news, the government, this happened toward the end of last week, I think, or sometime last week, but people were responding to it. HUD cut Section 4 contracts. Multifamily Dive has a decent piece on that.
About $4 million worth of contracts. There's a lot more to come. I think affordable housing is about to get pinched or squeezed, uh, through HUD. So I mean, we're gonna see what happens there. There were a lot of people celebrating over at Redfin, no doubt. Redfin is has some issues over the last, I'll say year or three. Their stock had been going down and they just weren't performing as well. So they just got the golden parachute. They got acquired by rocket companies.
Yes, and after the news of the previous acquisitions with rent and all that, this was definitely was buzzed about this week. There was another acquisition. Entrada acquired Colleen AI, and when you put Entrada and Colleen AI together, you get Eli, which is I haven't seen it, but that's now in the space.
Very interesting. And then I actually happened to bump into the folks at Pet Screening. So John Bradford, the CEO of Pet Screening, he's the founder and CEO of Pet Screening. He happened to be at RecCon, bumped into him, had a nice little chat, and yeah, they just secured some funding as well. He's actually going to be going back to his full-time job of CEO,
Nice.
because he has also been in the legislature in Carolina. So he's going to be heading on back. He did that for about four cycles. So he's heading on back to being founder and CEO of Pet Screening.
Great. Yeah, so a lot of news, a lot more of events. We are going to start uploading not just recaps from Retcon, but recaps from some other events and recaps from the show onto our website and also onto the Multifamily Media Network that will house a lot of that content.
That's right. And get ready. Revise is supposed to be announcing something big. I learned that they part of their team couldn't make it to some of the events because they're supposed to announce something, and I'm kind of eager to find out what that is. So I didn't get the inside scoop yet, but I look forward to figuring out what they're launching here.
Sounds good. Well, Eric, go back to your family. Hopefully, you get some sleep and rest this weekend, and hope your little guy feels better. And we will see everybody a week from now, hopefully live on LinkedIn. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out by Friday. That's 1% better for us, Eric.
That is 1% better for us. Thank you all for watching and stopping by. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye.
Awesome.